There's a lot you still don't know about Raft. Hi friends, and welcome back to Raft. Although this game may have just come out with its full 1.0 release just a few months ago, it was first added to Steam in early access way back in 2018. That means that there's a lot of players who have had at least 4 years to get to know the ins and outs of our favorite ocean floating simulator, but what if I told you that there's some pretty useful or interesting stuff that even you OG players still don't know? That's what we're going to be talking about today, so be sure to leave a like if you enjoy and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It would be much appreciated. But without further ado, here are 10 things that you still don't know about Raft. There's actually a lot of cool stuff that you can do with signs to make your raft a bit more interesting beyond just labeling what's in your chests. Although this can be kind of finicky with the character limits on each line of the sign, you can change a number of parameters about the text on the sign to customize the way that it looks. Specifically, you can change the text size, the text orientation, the text color, you can make it bold, you can make it italic, just using a simple code format. I don't know anything at all about computers, so one of you probably knows more about how this works than I do, but I do know that you can make some pretty cool signs this way, and it's really easy to do. Just insert your desired parameter, like size, into the sign, then your desired text, and magically your text has been resized according to whatever parameter you entered. Using this in combination with a color parameter is how I make some of the cool labels for my more intensive builds, so this definitely has practical applications. If you want something a bit less practical but still cool that you can do with this sign technique, Raft actually has 15 built-in emojis into this text system that you can call up using the simple sprite parameter. These can also be resized just like the text, so you can create some huge emojis on your wall if you want to. This is a bit less practical, like I said, but it's still interesting, and I'm relatively willing to bet that at least some of you have never seen this before. You can make objects appear to float in Raft by attaching their hitboxes together. For example, you can stack 2 of the normal smelters on top of each other by placing one, building a floor on top of it, and then placing your second smelter on top of that floor. After that, you can remove that floor and both smelters will stay in place without the barrier in between them, which can actually be pretty useful if you're one of those people who gets annoyed by trying to find the small metal slot when you're trying to make a space-efficient smelting setup. But smelters aren't the only objects that work this way. Unfortunately, the ability to hang chests off of the advanced anchor was removed after I posted my tiny raft build, but there are still plenty of very cursed ways to hang your chests on stuff that you probably shouldn't be able to. My favorite that I've found so far that you can hang chests off of is an engine, by building a wall on either side of the engine and then hanging your chests so that they align with the engine structure, and then again you remove said wall. Typically, when you would remove this wall, your chests would be destroyed and you'd probably be having a pretty rough time, but for some reason the hitboxes work in such a way where these ones just stay up. This is far less practical than the smelting setup, but it's nifty nonetheless. So if you think of other cool hitbox interactions that you want me to test out, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Moving right along, this might seem blindingly obvious to some of you, but if you're like me, you might not have realized that all of the trees in the park section of Tangaroa are fully harvestable and will drop palm leaves despite clearly not being palm trees. Like other harvestable trees in the game, the trees will always drop a set number of planks and leaves in a set pattern, which in this case is 1 plank, 1 leaf, 1 leaf, 1 plank, 1 leaf, 1 plank. This puts them on par with the mango trees, but if you replace the one mango into a less useful palm leaf. Interestingly, this is also the only tree that I've found so far that doesn't ever drop seeds. I covered the predicted seeds in another episode of this same series, but as far as I can tell, the Tangaroa trees will never drop any seeds whatsoever. I guess that makes sense because it most certainly isn't a birch, palm, evergreen, or mango tree, but yeah, raft trees in general are just pretty weird. The radio item is generally used to play the cassette tapes that you find when you're treasure hunting, but it can also play some built-in tunes for your listening pleasure regardless of your tape collection. If you listen to the radio between songs, however, you may hear something a bit strange. If you were listening closely, you might have heard some of the letters from the NATO phonetic alphabet being read out in a creepy voice. There are actually two of these messages in total, and if you write down what they actually say, the first one says, "All your rafts are belong to us." That's a reference to an old Japanese game called Zero Wing with the famous line, "All your base are belong to us," which you've almost certainly heard of even if you've never heard of Zero Wing the game itself before. The second message reads out, "The goats are a lie," which of course is a reference to the best Valve game ever made, which is Portal, with the whole "the cake is a lie" thing that took over the internet in like 2007 or whenever that whole thing happened. So the readers themselves have a little secret of their own that you may or may not have heard of before. This one is kinda random, but it's still interesting nonetheless. If you lived on this planet for more than 7 years, you probably know that the sun is supposed to rise in the east and set in the west. This is a pretty established fact. But it's weirdly not true in Raft despite being something ridiculously simple. If you pick up the compass from the trading post, it will always point relatively north. Personally, I don't find this item that useful, but I was messing around with it when I noticed that in Raft, the sun rises in the north and sets in the south. This changes absolutely nothing about the game, but it's a tiny oversight that you think the devs maybe would have noticed when implementing a compass into this game. I have more evidence to present to you in my ongoing quest to prove that physics is not real and therefore cannot hurt you, because in other videos of mine, I've already covered just how broken grass plots are because of the clipping possibilities, and the way that carpets are broken because they can make things float on shelves. Well, what if I told you that we can combine the glorious effects of both of these glitches into a new, exciting glitch to ignore foundation requirements? If you've played more than 15 minutes of Raft, chances are you've encountered some kind of machine or item that has to be placed with some part of it in the water. Either this usually means that you have some stuff around the outside edge of your raft where it is at risk of being eaten by Jeremiah, or you have to make a hole in your raft to place it where you are at risk of falling into the hole and then being eaten by Jeremiah. Neither one is particularly awesome, and that's where this little fun fact comes in. If you place a carpet down on the foundation level of your raft, you can simply ignore the water placement requirements for any of those machines that otherwise need to be on the edge or next to a hole. I've found that this works best with the large rectangle carpets, but theoretically it's possible with any carpet shape. Just be warned that it might take a bit of finagling to be able to place something down, and usually it won't light up green right away, but if you wiggle it a bit, it should eventually work. I've tested everything that I can think of that has a water placement requirement, and it's worked with all of them so far. Just be warned that these items inherently also need to be placed on foundations specifically, so unfortunately you can't move them up to upper floors this way, but it's still a nice way to remove one of the game's minor inconveniences. It does create some pretty cursed rafts though, so be warned if you want to use this in your own playthrough. This is another small and simple tip, but I feel like I always get tons of comments telling me that they didn't know this when I mention it in a build tutorial, so here we go. If you've been annoyed by the wood direction not matching up when you want to place down some of the corners on your raft, here's a super simple fix for it. When you're hovering with the build hammer to place a triangular floor or foundation, hit Z to mirror the grain direction to match up with your normal foundations or floors. This also works if you want to change the orientation of a pillar for some reason, or mirror any texture from the building hammer. I just find it particularly useful in the corner situation, so if you didn't already know that, you do now. The last three things all contain minor story location spoilers, so if you'd like to avoid those, I'd recommend stopping here. If you need more Raft videos to watch, I'd recommend this one of mine instead. Anyways, Varuna Point was the first story location added by the recent Chapter 3 update, and in case you weren't aware, there's a kind of massive shark down there who wants to body slam you into a wall repeatedly until you die. Typically, you're supposed to defeat said massive shark who would like to body slam you into a wall until you die, by instead making it body slam pillars filled with dynamite until it dies instead of you. This shark is also invulnerable to all of the normal weapons that you can create, meaning arrows, machetes, spears, and a sword. None of that stuff can make any dent in the rhino shark's measly 40 actual HP. However, if you manage to acquire the dev weapon, which can only be spawned in with a console or mod menu, then for whatever reason, this one particular weapon can override the physical damage limitations on the shark and will instantly deck it. It will also temporarily softlock the floor progression, but the shark does respawn, meaning that you could technically farm infinite rhino sharks this way. So that's pretty cool, I guess. Raft's final story location, Utopia, has a lot of the normal features for the other story locations in the game. There's unique enemies to fend off, puzzles to solve, and interesting areas to explore. But one of the features that's relatively unique to Utopia is this large parkour course that you're supposed to complete twice as you solve another puzzle. The parkour can be a bit challenging if your computer is a bit slower, or if you simply don't enjoy platforming, which is why I think this little fact is worth sharing. You can actually skip the majority of that parkour section using a really easy trick. If you manage to get yourself through the very first bit of the course and onto the second raised net, you can actually just walk over to the wall where the course ends. There, you'll find a little pulley mechanism that's meant to let you transport a heavy cog all the way over here, but you can use this mechanism to skip all of those tough jumps. Just pull the handle to lower the barrel down to your level, jump on top of it while crouching, and then pull the handle again. This will bring the barrel up to the same level as the raised wall, where you can just jump off and skip the spinning platforms and all that fun stuff. It does look a bit buggy, but that's the price you pay for using an exploit. Anyways, this is super easy to do if you don't have the patience to navigate through the parkour, or you just want an easier method. Maya and Rohi have been the face of Raft for a very long time, with Maya being introduced in the summer of 2017 and Rohi arriving just a few months later in the fall. Up until the release of Chapter 3, these two were the only playable characters, and they shared a single image on the first page of the story journal. That all changed when Chapter 3 was released. Now, there are a total of 6 playable characters that come in the form of Maya, Rohi, Tala, Johnny, Elaine, and Shogo, which you'll unlock as you progress through various story locations. What makes this especially interesting is that, depending on what character you load into your world as, the first page of the story journal is always different. Neither Maya nor Rohi carries the original image from before the 1.0 release, and now each of them has their own image with a tagline indicating something about their past. Rohi kept the original tagline of "See you somewhere dry" from his sister, while Maya's was replaced with an image of her grandfather and the line, "If you want to catch the big one, just keep trying until you do." All 6 characters have their own unique image and tagline, but Elaine's is probably the most tragic. Her image shows her on a park bench with 2 young women, whom we can assume to be Elaine's daughters. The image carries the tagline, "Remember what you're fighting for," which, if you keep in mind that there aren't too many survivors left in the world, means that Elaine most likely watched her daughters either leave Tangaroa or succumb to the combination of lurkers and famine that struck the city before it was abandoned. I just find it exceptionally interesting that the devs chose to introduce the individual characters this way outside of the single interaction that you get when you talk to the new NPCs. It really brings the world to life, and this is a hidden detail that I don't think too many people paid that much attention to. It just makes Raft all that much more special. And those are 10 things that you now know about Raft that you may not have before. Be sure to let me know which one of these facts was your favorite, and if there are any fun bits of Raft trivia that you think I should cover in the future. Also, as a bit of housekeeping, thank you all so much for your support recently. We hit 10k subs here on the main channel, which I am incredibly grateful for, so if you'd like to celebrate with me and others from this lovely community, I'm hosting some Jackbox games for all to enjoy this Saturday, the 17th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on this channel. Feel free to stop by and say hi and meet a ton of other really cool people. Anyways, that's it for me for now. I hope you enjoyed. Please consider leaving a like if you did, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps me out. I hope to see you all again soon, but until then, have a great day.